Hello and welcome back to Off the Roll Podcast by STEK USA. This is episode 16, Tint Training with STEK. I'm Michael Ohman and have with me today Robert Ohman, also known as Ohman, who is our lead tint trainer. Ohman, we're very excited to have you on board the STEK team. And man, this is going to take some correction. If you guys saw our last video about STEK, now being STEK, well, we've been fixing our ways for about 6 years. So forgive me if I let a couple of those slip. That being said, back to Robert. He is one of the newest additions to our team. We're very grateful to have him and his expertise on board. He's been in the industry for quite some time and want to cover quite a bit in today's episode. But before we get into too much about Robert and kind of his history, I just want to make sure that we capture your attention for those that are listening, interested in tint training. And that's why I wanted to cover the first question of just being, what do you think the most beneficial part of going through tint training is versus trying to train yourself how to tint?
So I think when you're doing training and say hands-on training, whether it's at a facility or a trainer comes to you, I think it's the repetitive thing that you're doing over and over. So you're constantly cutting a window, redoing it, cutting a window, redoing it. Trying to train yourself, you're going to try to go through the whole process, and at the end you think you did okay or you didn't, and then you start all over. So it's better to do each step multiple times and learn that muscle memory of each step you have to do.
And it's also a safe space, right? Where you're there to make mistakes. You're going to know what the good habits are, what the bad habits are.
Correct.
And I think one thing that I've heard from feedback on our other training courses is exactly just the repetition, that you get to go through this process and practice using our material. You're
Correct.
not, work on a client's car.
We'll burn through plenty of film and you'll actually get to, you mess up, don't worry about it, move on to the next one and just keep going.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us. The first question I want to get into is maybe in elevator pitch, if you will. Can you tell us how you joined the automotive industry? We know you have quite a bit of background. You've been in it for a couple decades.
Yeah, so it's coming up on 20 years.
Yeah.
I always tell everyone now it's like half my life I've been doing cars. Started in automotive accessories, so obviously to electronics and things like that. And then you look at more things that you can add on to a shop for selling to the customer, and window tint became one of them. Window tint then became more than the electronics. And then I converted over to just window tint. Did that for many years. Created some products for the window tint industry, which then helped me stay in that industry more. And now I'm working with helping more people learn how to tint.
Awesome. Almost full circle there. And I'm just curious, did you have anyone that trained you on window film, or did you teach yourself?
No. So back then there was no YouTube. You had some like forums you could go on. I just had to mess up. I had to mess up a lot. And I tell people that if you're training in anything, like to be training, you need to mess up, because if you put a piece of tint on and you did a good job, you pat yourself on the back, you think you're good, then you find an obstacle later on. So with some of the guys, when I train them, it's better to mess up right away, right at the beginning. The more you mess up, the more things you're going to remember going forward.
Yeah.
So with me, it was just kind of thrown to the wolves, try it myself, friends and family messing up their cars and, fingers and bubbles and it not being cut right. And back then too, you weren't using as quality a film as now. So it was all pretty much self-taught. And then over the years, you start meeting other tinters and you pick up on tips and tricks that they do. You realize you were doing it wrong the whole time. So it's come a long way.
Awesome. And well, and just to that story a little bit, to getting yourself into the industry, I remember when we were on job a couple weeks ago, you were just explaining that really I was doing it for myself. Mm-hmm. And my friends, my family started to notice, and it became more and more, reliable of like, hey, maybe I can make this leap of faith.
Correct. Yeah. So I started in the whole like Fast and Furious scene of things in the early 2000s. And so I enjoyed working on cars, and people were like, where'd you get that done at? And I'm like, well, I did it myself. Like, well, can you do it for me? I'm like, well, I guess I can. And then I finally realized I should start charging people for this. And then I should start having a better space than someone's parking lot or, the parking garage at the mall. And so then I decided to create a shop and go from there.
Awesome. Well, that I think is a natural progression for a lot of us, just to kind of build that demand. And obviously you have a lot of learning experiences throughout those challenges, and going from, someone that wasn't a business owner into multiple, entrepreneurships, if you will, is something that I think a lot of our listeners can relate to. Was there something in particular about window film or window tint that caught your interest and kind of had you run with it, or was it really
the main
demand?
reason I kind of ventured more towards the tinting than the electronics is your brother's sister's cousin can't put the tint on for you. You know, with radios, everyone could put it together. They could connect wires. It might not look clean, but it at least worked. Window tint is a visual product. You want it to look clean. You want it to look good. You don't want the bubbles. You don't want the creases. So me offering that service, I knew people weren't just, I mean, you'd have some people that would go to an AutoZone and grab some film and try it themselves. And then they learned right away, nope, take this off. I'm going to pay someone to do it. And so that's what made me gear more to the window tint side, because it is a profession that you need to not necessarily be certified, but you want to have someone who knows what they're doing to do it, not just your Uncle Eddie who can connect some wires with some household twist ties and stuff. So
yeah. And I mean, I've seen repercussions of bad wiring, which result in cars burning down and stuff like that. And window tint is something that you're going to notice every day you're in your car. And so if it isn't done properly or with a insufficient product, you might have failures and other issues that then become more of a hassle. And, it's another way. So for our listeners that might not be super familiar with tint, what do you say are the most popular reasons people shop for window film?
So, when we first started, it was, make your windows as dark as you can. One, it looked cool. One, for privacy. You can't see anyone in the car, can't see your stuff in the car. But it has dramatically changed over the years to the UV protection, the infrared rejection, protecting your interior from fading, as well as your skin, protecting your skin. But there's been so many more benefits to window film now, along with the clarity. So 20 years ago, I put 5% tint on your car. You couldn't see the stop sign at night. And now, even with the darker films, the optical clarity in the ceramics allow you to visibly see outside your windows.
Yeah.
So It's come a long way just since I've done it. And I'm pretty sure the guys 20 years before me it's changed a lot.
Yeah. And from your experience, is that just simply the technology is better? Is it the same technology just improved upon, or is it a whole different
definitely different materials used, how the quality of whether you're using recycled materials or raw materials, the steps in manufacturing and in how they do their layers, how they create their scratch coat. So you could have a really good quality film, but if it's not friendly for the installers to work with, you're going to have, end results that aren't as top quality.
Sure. Awesome. And might as well just make this a little educational. Can you explain the difference between kind of the different series or levels of tint?
So in most film, that's one thing as a salesperson when I sold window tint, is educating a customer what they're buying. They're not just buying, let's make the windows darker. You have dyed films, you have carbon films, you have metallized films, why you should use or shouldn't use certain films. And then you get into the ceramic films and then the higher quality ceramics. You'll have a ceramic film that has the ceramic in a layer. You'll have it that's actually, maybe it's just a coating, so it's not going to last as long. Your metallized films shouldn't be used in newer vehicles that have electronics and GPS and cell phone signal and things like that. And then your dyed films are going to fail. They're going to fade out. They're going to lose their coloring. So there's a lot of different reasons. I'll ask a customer, why are you getting tint? Are you hiding your side chick or maybe your expensive stereo system? Or are you trying to protect your interior? Are you trying to protect your skin? As well as keep your vehicle cool, keep the passengers in your car cool. So there's so many different reasons why you're getting tint today than you did before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to help summarize that just a little bit is at those lower levels, the dyed and carbon films, that's primarily there for privacy, some UV protection. But if you want that infrared rejection, essentially, you're going to look at the ceramics. Correct. And again, there's multiple ceramic options there, even within the own STEK brand. So, well, very cool. That's enough tech talk for now, if you will. But curious, Robert, what are you most excited about coming on board Team STEK?
So the biggest thing is, I like tinting every day, no matter what. So to be able to not only continue to tint and keep my skills honed, but teach the next generation that's going to tint, or teach guys who are already doing other services in films, whether it's wrap or PPF or anything like that, and give them something that they can add on to their shop. Everyone is always looking for that next level, that next step. How can you grow your business? How can you make your business bigger? Adding on another service is definitely something that can help that. So I'm happy to bring my knowledge to the table, as well as continue to help people grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you obviously have quite a bit of knowledge. We're excited to see you. You just had your first class officially last week.
Correct.
And we have more rolling and coming up. And to your point, I think this is a really good opportunity, whether or not you want to run a business that is just for tint, or you're already offering PPF, ceramic coatings, detailing services. This really helps create a well-rounded selection and service options where people can go to you as a one-stop shop.
Correct.
And I think that
and
provides loyalty.
that was my main reason of getting into tint in the first place. I was tired of my current customers leaving me to go to another business because they offered a service I didn't have, which made me bring in Window Tint so that they would get everything in one spot.
Yeah. Great. Well, was there a most memorable experience from that first class last week, or anything that you're looking forward to more?
I think one of the cool things is at the end, like, they feel confidence that they can then go and take what they've learned and work with it. One of the students even tagged me in a post the very next day. He went straight home and tinted his car that he wanted tinted for 5 years, but he didn't want anyone else to tint it. He wanted to wait till he could tint it. And it was cool for him to tag me in that and see the photos and see that he's excited for even just that basic training class. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for people who have touched it a little bit, but then never realized the small tips and tricks that would make it so much easier. I remember when I first started, it would take me forever to tint a car, and then you learn certain techniques that you do in between the process, and that just makes it so much easier. And so it's nice to have people who have never touched it before, but then people who have touched it and then they walked away from it knowing that it wasn't for them, but for the wrong reasons. Like, if they learn the correct steps and the correct procedures, it can be another service that they offer and enjoy doing.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Is there one you think most common challenge when starting to learn window tint? Because I've heard a lot of PPF installers that I've worked with that are just like, man, tint's just not for me.
Yeah, so if you're already doing wraps or doing PPF and then you switch to tint, it's the same thing. If you take a tinner and throw them into PPF, like, the materials are different, the application is different. One film is more forgiving than the other. One film can be pulled off and be put back on. The other one can't. And so there's a lot involved in just learning each individual step so that you can master any of those types of films that you install.
Yeah. What would you say is a realistic timeline for someone that has never touched tint coming into the class and getting up and running to where they're confidently offering it as a service? They're getting paid to do it. They feel good in their work. They're taking care of clients.
So that's another thing too, is being educated on what film that you sell and offer, and the pricing that you can offer it at will allow you to know that, hey, I can take a couple hours on this job, take my time, get it done correctly, and I'm still making money. There's a lot of people that race to zero and think that, like, I should charge half the other guy so that I can get the job, but then it takes you twice as long and then you didn't make any money. So, a couple hours is a good range for, like, people starting out. You'll see people that will do a car in less than an hour. On a Friday at 5 o'clock, you'll see a crew knock out a car in 30 minutes.
Sure.
But for you base it off of, are you making enough money for the time that you're spending on it? You could charge double the other guy and spend double the amount of time. So that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're offering a good product that you can sell at a reasonable price, but that you spend X amount of time on it and you're still making money.
Yeah. And even on a broader scale than that, like coming out of the class, do you think they're going to be ready to rock and start charging, or how many cars should they practice on?
So yeah, I definitely think that, like, out of the class, you shouldn't just go in and start booking, jobs and expecting to get your retail price out of it. You should come away from that, find friends and family, find some maybe other people at your shop, your employees or your employees' friends and family, and say, hey, I've just learned how to tint. I'd like to continue my skills. I could either give it to you for half off or help cover the cost of the film, or maybe you just eat it so that it's part of your training. You might say, like, hey, I'm going to buy X amount of rolls of film and I'm just going to burn through this and learn it and hone it so that I feel comfortable charging somebody. Because the last thing you want is you want to go back and be like, yeah, I attended cars in training. It was great. I'm going to charge $500 for this car, and then it doesn't turn out well. Then that person's going to tell the next person, or they might not refer another person, where if you give it to them at a discount or free, that person is now going to tell, hey, my buddy or my friend now does window tinting. You should go check them out. And, you can build a reputation from that off of giving it at a discount or free compared to going straight out there and trying to charge full price right away and think that you're going to have the same result.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think that goes back to your selling experience of just expectations are super important. And so be honest, be transparent with your clients, be like, hey, this is a new service.
Correct.
I'm learning. Don't try to mask that fact, and that will get you a lot further. And,
Correct.
If there are hiccups, then you have the window of opportunity to go in there and fix it, and they're not surprised or upset. And so absolutely out of the gate too. I mean, it's super important. Get off on the right foot and don't rush into things just because you want to see that, money on the other side. That will come in good time and through good process and diligence and practice. So very cool. Well, getting back into the technical side just a little bit, I'm curious, in PPF, there's a little bit of a debate between, hand cut bulk installing versus plotter cut. And I know window tint, you can do both as well. What is kind of your stance on that? Obviously, probably both skills you have, but which do you think works, or is there an application where one works better?
So when it comes to a plotter, I feel everyone should learn to hand cut. Everyone should start with hand cutting. You learn all the steps and techniques it takes to tint. For maybe there's some applications you don't have a plotter. Maybe you have someone where you're going to go do a mobile job real quick, all your stuff set up at your place. But with a plotter, you're skipping those pattern steps. You're skipping putting the film on the car, tracing out your pattern, cutting your pattern, getting all that. With a plotter, it's more about volume than I guess it is which one's easier. You have the cost of a plotter, you have the cost of the plotter software, and so if you're not doing enough vehicles each week to justify paying all that money for it, a plotter might not be well. But you could also look at it on the other way around. You might not have the best hand cutting skills. You might not want to spend the time hand cutting. You'll justify that cost difference in just making the steps easier. With hand cutting, you can get a finer detailed edge on maybe higher end cars where you want to file the edges. You want there to be zero tolerance in the gaps. You want to drop the film down lower. Some of the plotter softwares too will give you a short and a long pattern. But with a plotter, it's more you got cars one right after the other. You're plotting one, you're tinting one, you're plotting one, you're tinting one. Maybe you have at least two guys. One guy can run the plotter while the other guy's prepping and cleaning. When you're almost done with a car, one guy can jump back on the plotter and get the next car ready. Versus if you're a one-man show, you might be the same amount of time frame to just grab the roll of film, put it on the car, cut it, compared to putting it on the plotter. You're the one sitting there running the software, cutting it, weeding it, peeling it, and then going over to the car to start tinting. As a one-man show, you might hand cut faster than the plotter. And you'll also have cases where maybe the internet's down, maybe the power went out, maybe you got to finish a car, maybe you got to finish a couple cars. Knowing how to hand cut will definitely save you from any hiccups. And sometimes guys will change their blade in the plotter, and then the plotter's not dialed in just right, and you're just burning through film and wasting film. You stop what you're doing, you leave the plotter alone, you go back to hand cutting for the day, get it finished up, and then you can go back. Because the last thing you want is middle of the day, your plotter messes up, and now you're at a standstill.
Yeah, just left high and dry and have some cars to deliver. So is it safe to say then that our training class that you put together for us and we'll be running is going to cover both techniques?
Correct. Yeah. So the main thing is to give them that muscle memory of learning all the steps in hand cutting. And then at maybe the last day of the class, they're working with the plotter, they're using the plotter, and then they're just honing those installation skills with the pattern that's already cut. But learning all the skills before that definitely helps. And then the plotter is just, you're moving forward, you're skipping those steps and just putting it right to the vehicle.
Cool. And what else can people expect going into class? I just starting at the start for PPF prep is one of the most important steps, right?
Correct. And window tint is the same thing, both inside and outside of the vehicle is very important in your cleaning steps, in making sure your work area is clean, making sure you have like trash cans set aside for your scraps and your liners. The last thing you want is liners on the floor, people stepping on them, slipping, and it's a messy area. You want to make sure you have proper tools, you have enough spray bottles or slip solution and stuff ready to go. You don't want to be in the middle of a job and have to stop and fill up another bottle, or if you use the keg spray or anything like that. So having everything in line and ready to go, as well as the proper tools, making sure you have, the good stuff to prep the window, to clean the window, to squeegee the window. So all that stuff comes before even putting a piece of film on the car.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is your kind of process? How soon are you getting hands-on in the class?
Yeah. So day one, they're getting their toolkit, which is a pretty extensive toolkit. It allows them to have every tool they could possibly need to attempt to tint the windows. They might not use every tool on every window, but the tools are there. And that's a big thing. When I first started, you had like 3 or 4 tools. You had a squeegee, a hard card, your knife. Mm-hmm. Having different tools to allow you to tuck film better or clean better or squeegee the window even in smaller corners or different areas. All that stuff helps. So first thing they do is they get their kit. We go over all the tools and why the tools are what they are and why they have so many, even though they might use 2 or 3 for each window. And so they go through all that. Then we start the cleaning process. The cleaning process is going through and inside, outside, making sure there's no contamination, because you can tint the perfect window. It could have no creases, no fingers, no bubbles, but then you have the dirt and contamination that you didn't clean. So that's probably half of the first day, is just knowing what tools to use, why to use them, and what process to start prepping and cleaning and getting everything ready.
Yeah. Awesome. And then that second half, do they start trying to shrink? Are they watching you? Or?
No. So yeah, I'll do a full window with them, and I'll show them the hand cutting and the installation and everything. From there, I like all the guys to jump right on a window as well, and just kind of see if they can do the steps that I did. I'll still walk them through and be like, make sure you shrink your window before you put it in. Make sure you're rounding your corners. Take your film from the window to your peel board. All the different steps. And by the end of the day, they've probably installed 4 or 5 doors in just day one. And then by day 2 is when we start on the rear window and the shrinking and all that kind of stuff. And then by day 3, they are working with the plotter. They're also maybe doing a windshield. We're doing some sunroofs. And if we get time and we have the vehicle available, they'll remove some old tint as well too, and learn the proper techniques for that, because you could also damage a car or damage an interior just from removal.
Sure.
So
great. Well, that sounds very well rounded. And again, if you guys are interested, reach out to us. We're more than happy to get you into the class. And, we'll be booking out hopefully for a couple months at a time. Yeah. So try to plan ahead on that. But Robert, wanted to talk about you a little bit more. And for those that might be familiar with our team here, we do have another Robert. So Robert Ohman here will be going by Ohman. Yep. And I know that you've had quite a bit of experience. You've worked in a handful of different environments, climates even, if you will. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, where did you come from? Have you, been up in Washington before? Was that a hard move for you, or did that work out well?
So actually, I was born right here in Washington, right here, the next town over. Lived here for 10, 11 years, and then moved to Ohio for the rest of my middle school and high school years. And right away, I got started in the automotive industry pretty much maybe a year or 2 out of high school. And I've worked on everything from massive stereo systems to custom interiors, all the different lighting and accessories, and you name it. If it goes on a car, it was something I did. Then to transition into window tinting and more window tinting stuff, I ended up creating products. It's going on almost 7 years now. Products to help protect the vehicle, help the installer with the installation. And so that dove me more into the industry and more into wanting to tint more. And the more I worked with film, the more I could help my products as well too. And then I started working for some other shops. After I didn't want to have my full-time shops anymore, I would go and either be an installer at a shop or be a sales manager at a shop. I've worked for a franchise and ran an entire franchise store, and worked for another film company doing some marketing and sales and things like that. And then now full circle around to training to start new people.
Awesome. And what is it like having worked with, a variety of different films over the years as well, but in those different environments? Are there other challenges that you find if you're coming
so
from?
Like you could have an entry-level film that's in Ohio where it's not too hot. It doesn't, you're never going to see the film fade or bubble up as you would if I installed the same film in Houston, Texas. In 6 months, it's gone.
Sure.
So your heat, your humidity, your elevation all matters in when you're installing film. For each different area, you might use different slip solution, more slip solution, working inside, working outside, air conditioned, not air conditioned. So I've been in all the aspects for both in a building, mobile, doing commercial and residential. It's different everywhere.
Yeah. And we actually had you out on a residential job just a couple weeks ago. So, stay tuned. We do have commercial residential film available, and we'll talk more about that and get more into that as our product develops and demand follows. I'm curious, what are your most challenging jobs that you've ever had? Whether it is commercial or automotive, what was that environment like? What kind of made it challenging? And did you have a good outcome?
So I think the biggest thing, and I teach this in the training too, is your work area is probably one of the biggest things. So I've been in a shop where there's no peel board or there's not proper, water filtration. You don't have a good setup. You're maybe working around another, part of the business in there too. So say you do have a shop where you're doing 12-volt electronics and you're doing window tint and they're right next to each other. It's really not beneficial for window tint to be there while they're working on a lot of other stuff. So having a good installation bay can make a huge difference. Having all the proper preparation stuff, your peel boards, all your slip solution and sprays, whether it's in bottles or tanks, having it all readily available, making sure there's a spot to put your stuff when you're done so that when the car pulls out, your stuff doesn't go with it too. So I think the most challenging thing for any place you're working at is your setup and where you're at. Even if you have to work in a small location or you have to work with somebody else, as long as you set up your area to be more efficient, as well as make sure that you're not losing stuff, you have stuff readily available. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. And did you have, what was one of those steeper learning curves for yourself? Was it an environment that you went into or any specific job where you're like, man, I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life? And it felt good to get done?
Not really. I mean, I've been on all sides of being an owner of a shop, being an employee of a shop. And so on one side, you could say the customer is probably the hardest part, or you could say, working on a very difficult car or a car that, you might be afraid you could damage or maybe it's just too much for you. The way I teach people when they're tinting vehicles is all glass is the same. It's glass. Just treat it like glass. It doesn't matter if it's a 95 Honda Civic or someone's bringing in a Lamborghini. As long as you do your same steps and your shrinking and your prep and all that and treat it the same, you're going to get the same outcome. So you might just take a little bit more care and make sure you don't, leave it a mess or anything.
Yeah. Well, great. And building off that just a little bit, is there any tricks or tools that you found as far as your mentality going into the jobs, whether it's challenging, it's hot, the environment isn't ideal, you're learning, you're stretching your skills or ability a little bit, that maybe our trainees can relate to as far as here's some, last minute advice when, the going gets tough, tough get going.
And so, when you do have those difficult days or those difficult vehicles, that's where having a quality product that you install at a good price that you can justify, you're not going to have the headache of, why did I take this on? This is a waste of time. This is a waste of money. If you're charging accordingly and you're using quality product, you can take that time and not rush and not have to
sweat small things.
Yeah, sweat the small things. Just take it easy. You're not rushing. You're not losing money. I think a lot of people do that. They try to start out very cheap and then it just hurt. They're like, this isn't worth it. I'm not making enough money. So anyone would do that in any profession. If you're not making enough money, why would you continue doing it? So it's better to start high, work your way down into, if you get better and you're more efficient and you're faster and you're like, yeah, I can do that car in half the time, I can charge a little less. But if you're charging for at least your skill and your time that it's taking you to do it, you're going to weed out a lot of those headaches of this is stressful and I don't know why I did this and I'm wasting money on film and I keep messing up. But if you charged accordingly, you mess up 2 or 3 windows on a job, you're not in the negative.
Yeah.
So,
and give yourself that buffer because we're human. It's not perfect. The environment's not always perfect.
And it's one of those things where, like, if you do have a bad window, just take it off and start over. When you try to fight it and you try to keep it and like you don't want to waste it and you're like, I can fix this, and you spend more time fixing it than just peeling it off and starting all over. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, now is the customer going to see this, So I tell people all the time, especially in the training, even if they're training and they're like, oh, I messed up. If you want to rip it off, start all over. Like, you need to start fresh. If you're trying to fight something that you're going to continue fighting, it's not going to come out good. And you're just going to be more stressed about it. And it can be a very stressful thing. Different windows, different applications, different film that you're using. Maybe you're doing a very difficult window, but the customer went with the inexpensive film. So it's one of those things I try to teach them too, is you're not basically charging more because it's a crazier car. Sell them a higher quality film that's going to make your job easier to install.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's just be honest, like, if you have a high-end car, you're going to want more performance out of your window film. So going through those same conversations we talked about earlier, setting expectations, learning why they want that window film, educating them on what the other options for the window film is in your best interest. And, I think for any profession, anything that you're doing that involves learning and evolving as an individual is, if you need to take 5 minutes, go get some fresh air, come back to it, and, face those challenges after you can cool down and hit a fresh set of eyes or hands or heat gun, whatever it is.
Yep.
So, yeah. Well, awesome. Is there any other advice that you want to give to our listeners other than, everything we've already covered today that I thought was all good?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great profession to be in. There's money to be made on all sides of it. And you get to work with something different every day. You're not working on the same piece, the same pattern every day. It's a different car. It's a different shape. And you get to see some cool cars or some cool things. And you get to change the look of a vehicle. So the customer's happy, you're happy. It's a cool profession to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is rewarding, and just like anything that you work hard for, it can pay off, both from a business growth standpoint, personal growth, and I also say, just as a car enthusiast, like, I won't ever have a vehicle again without window tint. Once you get your car tinted or your truck tinted, whatever it is, it totally does change your experience enjoying that car. So sure. I can encourage more people to get it. It's safer for you. It's safer for your car. Looks cool. It provides other benefits as well. So, all right. Well, we will wrap it up there. Thank you so much for everyone tuning back in. We will catch you on the next one. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.